Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today for how the PMP exam has changed in 2021. I am Lindsay with Beyond 20. I'll be facilitating the session today, and I've got the wonderful, we're so delighted to have Marianne Crow with us, as we call her, Mac, PMP instructor and practitioner extraordinaire. I'm going to quickly tell you a little bit about Beyond 20, and then I am going to pass it over to Mac. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, I hope most of you are, Beyond 20 is a 360-degree digital transformation consulting and training firm. We handle ITSM consulting, process design, costing consulting. We're partnered with Sharewell Service Management. We're also partnered with ServiceNow. That logo didn't make the slide. We do a lot of best practice training. We do PMP training, obviously. We also do Agile Scrum training, ITIL, of course, and then a full suite of cybersecurity training. So that's a little bit about us. Mac, take it away.
All right. And Lindsay, thank you so kindly. As I do want to say, I welcome everyone as she did to this just a slight overview, but an important overview for you to help you understand the new 2021 PMP exam. As she said, I do go by Mac. I've just got so many Mariannes in my life with other family members, as well as my grandmother I was named after. So my dad gave me that nickname when I was a little girl, and my name started with a C. Now I found a wonderful man that I've been married to for 45 years, and I'm still Mac. But that's enough about me and who I am. But I have been with a senior instructor with Beyond 20 for almost 7 years now. But my background really strengthens me to be with you today. I feel that I did work for AT&T, and in that regard, I spent 24 years in what you will learn from me to be traditional project management and what it all was about, and why is the new exam going to more of another side of the world today, which is the Agile presence in our world. The good news is that I have certifications in both areas. I am a PMP and I am an ACP, which is the Agile Certified Practitioner from the Project Management Institute. But the good news is then I have the experience in traditional project management as well in the adaptive side of the world where Agile practices play. But more importantly, then what I can bring you then is that I have already taught the new PMP exam that started on January 2nd, 2021, 6 times already. It's very rapid that people are wanting to jump on board on the new train for this new exam, and I'm anxious to share it with you what it is about. I'm in Texas right now, and I'm a little bit under a big storm, but I'm holding on to the strength that I hold for you to understand this and that the power will last. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So the good news is then required by trademarks that I think many of you would know, I have to explain that I will be using PMP, which stands for the Project Management Professional, and PMBOK guide. I'm hoping that many of you with us today understand that that is standing for the Project Management Body of Knowledge Guide. It is a registered trademark from PMI, known as the Project Management Institute. But it allows me to stop right here for just a minute on this credit slide to let you know that one of the first things that you would want to know about any of taking the PMP exam is that the PMBOK guide has always been registered and written by PMI to be their gold standard, their foundation guide that really relates why they have the exam and what is it all about. Beyond 20, as is any vendor that is allowed to train for PMI, the PMP exam, has to know that their material is allowed only by the PMI review. So the good news is then that the material that PMI uses that allows us to train for the PMP exam is also sanctioned as correct by them. But most importantly, the first thing I want to know, and it may be a question you had later and I'll address here, is that while there is a new 2021 exam that started on January 2nd, the related PMBOK guide that always is pointed to their editions of their exam will not and has not changed for this new exam. You will hear that the new exam is referenced as a 7th edition exam. However, the PMBOK will not be released until at least at this point in time, telling us as trainers, until probably early or mid 2022. Now, I'll explain how that doesn't affect you if you would want to sit for the exam with just looking at a different PMBOK, a PMBOK that references still the 6th edition of their exam, and I'll explain that as we move. So let's go ahead next then and begin thinking that we have an agenda today. And the agenda in four strict bullets would just say, oh, I'm just going to give you an overview and what's the requirements to sit for the exam and how to prepare for the darn thing. But no, what I'd like to do is really lead you in an agenda that more aptly would talk to you about why did the exam change? I always like to say that why the exam changed, and I want you to know that I have trained this exam since the third edition. So if you think through that, I've gone through the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and now the seventh edition. And I always like to relate when I talk about the newness of a new edition coming in, why did it change? And we'll lead through that in our agenda. Then we will talk about what is the new exam content and why was it added and what was deleted or added from the prior editions to make it the new offering of the seventh edition. And then I'll let you know that I would spend some small time, but important time, to have you understand how would you plan if you wanted to take the exam, how would you plan to take it? What would you have to do on your side? And what would we recommend for the revised format to study and so on? So let's take the next effort on our next area there and begin our real meat and potato of what we want to talk about. Now, what we want to talk about is that the new exam likes to say that it sounds like a good old country western song, a little bit old and a little bit new. But what it means then is that the 2021 PMP exam reflects what the world is about today in at least project management through what would either be a private corridor, the private industry corridor, the military corridor, the federal or state corridors, all are seeing a major change in the business environment in the last 10 years. But I always like to say, where did it start? And while I always like to go, if there's a change in anything, I like to look back in the history of where it was. So why is the change necessary? So if we think, and I want to really point you to the very beginning of project management and give where now you'll see the dramaticism, why the changes are coming. Back in the 1950s, there was a term used as the Cold War era, a very dangerous time in our lives, that after the Second World War, there was a threat at one time that after all of World War II had set down, and that in the Cold War era, it was a cautionary time that we thought perhaps that Russia was going to invade through Cuban waters onto American soils. And I'm not wanting to be dramatic here, but I want to compliment that in the 1950s, 55, 56, 57 era, when the DoD, the Department of Defense, had to resurrect a submarine program to get back in, if necessary, to our waters to head off that threat, they are now credited with not only doing that great adventure and endeavor to protect us, but also, my friends, to bring forward many best practices that are known today and strengthen today's project management foundations. One of the things that they brought forward then to get to where I wanted you to have this little new and a little old attitude is that they, in my bullet that is on the very bottom of the slide, says that work required them to resurrect their submarine program. They worked, rather than do the work sequentially, they said, we've got to work fast but strong. So they went into what are called overlapping project phases, which when visualized resembles water cascading downstairs, that they felt it looked like a waterfall. And I'm hoping that many of you who haven't had the true privilege to talk with or meet really know what that means. That is a term that has been around for a very long time. Where do you work? What's your environment? And people would say, oh, I work in waterfall methodology. Well, that just meant then that everybody, if you did a sequential schedule, a sequential plan, it would take so long to get done. So they would overlap. And waterfall was well known for many, many times. But if we go to our next slide, then we can see that what happened to move now to the new exam. Well, what happened is that the PMP exam, which really didn't start until 1984, and that was because what happened from 1957 to 1984? Well, the world was resurrecting the manufacturing of our country because of the wars being down, and so we were in manufacturing for a long time. And then the 80s came along, right? And information technology rose its head to say hello. And when that happened, then we moved into information technology more stronger. And really by the 90s, then it was going to move into software development with the .com era. So the first exam really wasn't even held to 1984. And if anyone's on the phone from Philadelphia, you hold the compliment of that was the first PMP exam, where 56 people, I'm sorry, came to take the exam and only 43 passed. But then really what happened was they started their editions with the PMBOK back in 2000. And then the last edition of the 6th edition was retired on December 31st of 2020. Moving along all of those years, if you would allow me to say, from 1984 to 2020, to say the world had changed. But what had really changed in 2000 era was when the dot-com era failed. And this is my slide now. When the dot-com era failed in the early 90s into the 2000 era, Agile Manifesto was written by a group of practitioners that were known as the Agile Alliance. And they sat and said, what are we doing wrong in software development? You know, everybody had now the web presence was coming up. And so the Agile Manifesto said, well, we need to realize that while maybe we were using waterfall method, that overlapping sequential hard plan of products and world, this doesn't fit the software development world. And it wasn't sufficient to deliver product value, a word they strengthened so strongly, product value in a short time frame. And then while they wrote a pure manifesto that I won't give you the full details on now, it simply meant that we need to deliver value quicker to our customers in short spurts. Short sprints, it was almost said, are an iteration in value. And now that is where the change has mainly come to the new PMP exam. That due to the globalization of project management around the world, a little bit of this and a little bit of that is now the way that project managers have to work, by either doing what was called the waterfall method of project management, or the new way, which is the agile way of doing it, which is called adaptive, an adaptive way to do work in shorter spurts, or shorter sprints, or shorter iterations to bring value to a customer. So if we go to the next slide, what I really want to stress now is to be on this slide for just a few more minutes or so, because the new exam has changed not only in its content, but it also has changed a main effort I want everyone to understand now, that the use of the word waterfall is not going to be used anymore in their exams, because waterfall really wasn't ever a methodology. But now the new way of saying that you're going to use overlapping phases of work to do your work for a hard product, service, or result is now going to be called a predictive methodology, a predictive life cycle. So it is the same thing, but what does predictive, why are they saying predictive rather than waterfall? It's because it makes it clearer that traditional project management using waterfall really was needing a stable scope. So you can see that now. Predictive work needs a stable scope. But what does that mean? It means you need a strong, sturdy planning effort to understand scope and the resources with skills that will do that work against a task schedule to do and hopefully use the budgets that have been approved to bring customer value of a product result of success. So the stable scope means that it's very important to plan through many processes using the correct and given skills that you hold, the knowledge you hold, and understanding tools and techniques to bring it forward. And now it means then that it's predictive, because we want to use best practices of tools and techniques for what is called process-driven work. So simply stated for your exam, that means that predictive will still move you. There it is, where it's coming, friends. Hang on, that is the old exam. The predictive is still there. That's why they haven't changed their PMBOK. And there are still 49 solid processes that are in the new exam from the old 6th edition, stable as they can be, because while waterfall is not the word anymore, they're going to call it predictive to bring out the fact that there still is that need in the world. The globalization of projects still needs the use of a predictive way to baseline your agreements most often before you work on a long-term, not a long-term project. It could be 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, but it's something that is more stable to understand that it is a plan-driven type of approach rather than what is now the other side of the exam, which is 50% of an agile value. It is going to be called on your exam, and you'll see it soon. It's going to be called adaptive. So it will now be shown that the outline will be 50% predictive and 50% adaptive, showing agile value. What does agile mean? Agile is not a methodology. Agile is a set of principles. So instead, I'd like you to learn before I move, not yet to the next slide, but I want you to know that adaptive really means that you could be agile. You know what agile means in life. You're nimble, you're adapting. You can change easily. So the agile value means now that we still can have, with even the same industry or the same corridor of work, a company, even an organization, even could have two ways to do business. In the second way, using shorter time spans to give value deliverables to your customers. And software fits that fine. So really, agile principles were put against the software development side, and now it still resides there for a majority of the work that is done on online developments. And therefore, then the predictive side of the house still handles that big load that says we have bigger projects, longer projects, more stable projects that take more of a solid plan before we can say that we have something of valuable deliverable to our customer, clients, or operations or main departments. You would be hearing terms that instead of the 49 processes that I addressed to you under the predictive, on the new exam, you'll hear new things that deal with two approaches to Agile. The majority of your test will test you on what is called the Scrum approach, and the XP are spelled out would be extreme programming approach to using Agile value. There are about 16 approaches to Agile, and I'm glad to say I know all of them, but only two will be strengthened to you on that new exam. So now, if we look just in two buckets, or a half empty, half glass full attitude, that 50% will be predictive and 50% will be adaptive using Agile value. Let's go to the next area then and realize that, as Mac has been stressing to you all, that the predictive versus adaptive SDLC, standing for software development lifecycle, is where you need to understand and how you would be approaching a new exam effective January 2nd of this year. Predictive, as I've said, really requires a well-stable scope, and that word would be requirements, have to be well understood and well defined. If you've been working in project management, you know that you can elicit or collect requirements all day long, but if they're not understood and well defined, then in a longer term project, then you have no stable base to even begin thinking about a schedule to put to that work if it's not stable enough. So the requirements under predictive are well defined to what is called a defined scope, to go to a work breakdown structure, and then finally go to a schedule and the approved budgets to pay for the bills of providing that to a success. But on the adaptive software development lifecycle, now there's your two words, predictive SDLC and adaptive SDLC. The requirements are accepted with uncertainty. Well, what does that mean, uncertainty? The word that you'll hear on that exam is that their requirements emerge. They have emerging requirements. Because they're working in shorter sprints or shorter iterations, shorter time boxes, they don't want to do a big plan. They often say in the adaptive software development lifecycle that our working software is our requirements. It is our documentation. So in other words, then, they are on a 1 week, a 2 week, or a 4 week time box to provide the value to their customer. And so their requirements emerge. Completely different life cycle from the predictive side of the house. As a matter of fact, if we go to our next slide, then we would see that the 2021 7th edition, proudly said, of the PMP exam on the predictive side will be the same as others who will hold their certifications today. And it'll give me a chance to tell you that right now, before the 7th edition came in, there are almost 1,050,000 PMPs in 214 countries. They would have all been tested under that predictive effort of work. 1,050,000 as of on around when the 6th edition shut down. Now, I find that exciting to tell you very quickly because I don't see it as many. I see it as really the prestigious certification that this is. So now you still will be tested on the predictive way of doing work under 3 baselines of your scope, your schedule, and your cost by running you through 5 process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitor, control, and close, which are clearly then the 5 process groups that will detail many knowledge areas of your background in project management that will come forward. And then more so, it will reinforce it by 49 processes and their tools and techniques. On the Agile side, which would now be more of our adaptive side of the house, they will teach you the true background of roles under Agile, the ceremonies and the events of Agile under two main approaches of Scrum and extreme programming. There will be a dash of salt on another approach called Kanban, lean from manufacturing, but then they'll also say that why the exam has changed is to make a hybrid of Scrum, XP, Kanban, and lean has begun the world today, moving not only Agile adaptive from the software development side of the house, but it's used in construction now and some other industries. So they're beginning not to convolute Agile in any way. That would be against the Agile Alliance and Manifesto. It really is saying that we need a hybrid. So when I retired, as I did from AT&T, we were adaptive on one side of our shops and we were predictive on the other side, because we knew that we wanted to do our web presence, att.com, under adaptive, but we wanted to put our phones, our production of our phones, and keeping our wireline business up for the phones to ring as well. Then we still had a traditional shop. So the hybrid is nothing more than saying it's not against the law. It never was to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So the little bit new and the little bit old has now joined to be a hybrid in which you will be tested. And then if we now spend time on our next area, let's get into more of the weeds of what really is on that exam. So if we go now for our topic areas, our first bullet and all other bullets, we have 3 bullets here that we can show, is that the exam focuses on 3 domains. And this first area I'm excited about because it's brand new, and that is the business environment. Now, this was never really not stressed in any regard on the other editions of our exam, but what it's going to do is highlight the connection between projects and organization strategy. I'll give you the tip before we go to our next area of discussion here, that simply means if you look up the word governance and you look up the word portfolio, projects, and programs, that is 8% of your test. The newness of this, I am excited about. I hope you will find it as well, that now the new exam is more so for the project manager, not just to be tapped to do work and manage it towards goal, but to understand why we do this work, looking for the strategy that put you in place to do a project and why that strategy came out of your portfolio offices, not knowing that you would have to write business cases or feasibility studies. No. But understanding the why also helps to do the what and the how. I will do it as my responsibility. So that is a brand new area. The people, we've always had people do projects, but the second area that will be new to this exam is emphasizing one more time a more widened skill of a project manager in their skills and activities with effectively leading a project team. You know the word project manager. Management and leadership skills are 2 traits. But now they're strengthening in people more so that you will understand not only stakeholder involvement, you always have stakeholders on projects, but really understanding the strength of you leading by inspiring trust, by leading by example, your team towards the value. The word value is so driven on the new exam that it is important. It almost awakens a new day to not just say, oh, I'm just going to do the same old thing I've done for 20 years. No, the world is different now, and it takes the strengthening of a project manager to be a leader and a manager towards goal. The last thing will be the aspects, though. So 42 and 8 will be people and process, business environment. Those will equal 50% of your exam. But then the other 50% will directly go to what I have tried to indicate to you, which is going to be 50% will be using the predictive side of the house for the old exam, but now adding all of the work that is done on the adaptive Agile approaches. I would not want you to leave me today and think that Agile uses processes. They're not a process driven. They are a change driven approach. So what we can tell you before we wrap up this area for our next slide is that the predictive is clearly, friends, a plan driven approach, and adaptive on the new exam will tell you that it is a change driven approach. Change could be expected because if you're doing something instead of 6 weeks or 6 months and you're doing it instead in 14 or 30 days, You can adapt to change more easily for customer value. So if they change what the market read is today, or they change what is important for the online presence, they can adapt to change easily. So it is a change-driven approach. That way, then the processes will now show what are the prescribed process tools and techniques of predictive, but then instead, the words I'd like you to learn for the way that they will discuss with you in the new exam for adaptive is sharing how they use roles, events, and artifacts, sometimes called roles, ceremonies, and artifacts of effort. So moving to our next area, it shows a little bit into the weeds of what I was trying to indicate on the prior slide, that the business environment will truly give us what we are calling the governance, the project management disciplines, how they overlap, that being your portfolio to your program to your projects, and how you will lead and manage that in effort by using either a predictive life cycle or adaptive life cycle. Then you'll hear we always had stakeholders and communications on the other prior editions of the exam, but now a strengthening of the roles, the actual call out of not only a sponsor or the managers or the finance department or the legal department or the marketing department or the IT. It's going to be a much more strengthened look at stakeholder communication roles and where do you work in what type of industry and what characteristics present you challenges or charms to get your work done. Then we've already said, our last process indication of our prior slide said there's a difference between the predictive way of doing work and adaptive way. But either way, anything that spans what both of them do, the value delivery spectrum, will be now shown on that exam in these three domains. Now we can go over to the next area as we want to on our slide to understand that if we look at what I've tried to strengthen on for you, what is the angle of the exam content, we can say that the new exam also has taken into the considerations of the COVID vaccine, the COVID pandemic. I'm thinking vaccine, doesn't everybody? The COVID pandemic has brought new exam recommendations. The exam can now be taken online, and it can be taken still in some test centers I'll address to you in a moment. But right now, because of the pandemic, you can schedule your exam at any time, and they are now taking exams 24/7. You can go out to PMI.org and take a look out there, and if you haven't made your decision to go forward for a PMP certification, just get out to PMI.org and look under their certification for the project management professional. Just take a peek at that certification area, and you'll see that it is very easy now. Why do I say easy to take the exam? The exam is not an easy exam. It's going to take some strength to understand all the best practices offered, but many have done it. Why do I say I want you to get out to PMI.org? Because then you can see that sitting for the exam requires an application. And now the other thing that has changed for your benefit, friends, is that it is only 4 screens of data you have to fill out. Only 4 screens. It used to be 30. Now it's only 4 screens. And then after you get your application going, you can't finish it until you would take what is necessary to be 35 hours of training. They call it formal education from an approved vendor, of which Beyond 20, of course, is one. And we have classes ready for you to come to if you'd like to sit for that exam. But if we really realize then that the exam is now new, then they are also trying to adjust for the globalization of project management to offer it in an online presence. Now, the good news is then that we can go ahead and say on our next area that I think we're ready for questions. Is that correct, Lindsay? Are we at a question area now? No, we got our exam requirements. Good. I want to make sure we had that.
Yes, we do.
Let me address this very quickly. I missed that. Let me go back. Let me start just there ever so quickly, and then we'll go. You'll find all of this information on your PMI.org slide dealing with the PMP. But I want you to know, read clearly what are the online exam requirements. The important thing that I want you to know is that I have heard now, and I checked it last night before I come to you to speak to you this morning, that more and more test centers are opening again under the COVID safety procedures with masks and spacing of social distancing. So you now can look up on what is called, you'll see when you get out there to PMI.org, that there is a Pearson View website that you can review, Pearson View. You'll see it on PMI.org to see if there's a test center near you that still offers a presence with a test center as opposed to online. But there is a certain thing I do want you to know, and let's go ahead to the next slide so I can address that. A very important thing about this structure is that if you've ever talked to anyone who took a PMP exam, there used to be 200 questions, of which 25 were reserved back, so you were only answering 175, but you didn't know really what the other 25 were. PMI has just done this now. Now they're only offering 180 questions, but 5 will be reserved back, so you still are going to have scoring positioning of 175 questions. But what I want you to know is that now that the change will be, it's not just everything prior was 4 independent answers, A, B, C, D. Now they will have a new format of some multiple choice, some drag and drop, you know, the old story, drag it from here and drop it to the right answer, fill in the blanks, and other ways of asking the questions. All of this is explained on PMI.org. But what I want you to know, if you take the new exam, they will offer you something new, which is an optional 10-minute break, whether it's online or the presence in their test center. But I want you to know an important factor of that. If you take that 10-minute break that you want to get up and walk around, then you will not be able to, A, go back and answer the first 90 questions. They offer the break at the 91st question break out of 180. If you want to take a 10-minute break, then you cannot. They lock down the questions you've already asked and already answered, and they won't allow you to revise them. I say don't get up. Do not do that, because the second thing is that's important, and then I'll leave this, is that if you're back late from that break, and I mean 30 seconds, and I do mean that, then they will consider it an invalid test, and you will have to take another appointment and possibly repay. I'm not trying to threaten you, but I'm saying I would highly recommend to take it in a test center and condition yourselves to be there 4 hours with an uninterrupted value of what a test center can offer, even under COVID. All right, so the good news is then let's move to the next one and see that. We have a question and area period now. So, Lindsay, I'll turn it back to you. And what do you have for any questions or anything that we can now take our time and discuss with our our group?
We've got a couple that came through. Let's see.
Okay.
Some of these you covered, so let me try to be a little discriminating here. Oh, here's a good one. What devices do I need for online proctored testing?
Yes. What I want you to know is that the proctoring exam will still be offered by a proctor residing within the Pearson View Test Center. And they will make sure very clearly to you that you have to log on 45 minutes ahead of time. Very much is very important. That when you get on 45 minutes early, then they're wanting you there to do a system check. Second and third of all, what's important in that question is that if you're in the online, they will have you have to have a webcam, and you have to make it mobile so that when they ask you to scan your area of where you're taking the exam, that you have nothing on your desktop, there is no one in the room, that there's nothing on your area that could make sure that you are not bringing in your own paper and pencil, which you will not do. Do not bring in a calculator. Do not bring in paper. Bring nothing but yourself sitting in a room that they can see that no one else is present and nothing is on your desktop. Third, most important of all, is that you really need to know that when you take that online presence, that you'll have to use what is whiteboards. You'll have to know how to navigate to a whiteboard. You won't have paper. So if you want to do some calculations or try and think through some angles of discussion within your own reconciliation of a question, you have to go to a whiteboard. Also know that you won't have a calculator. You'll have to use a calculator in their software. So I am getting a lot of feedback because I've taught over 100 and some people now already this exam, and some have gone forward in that online presence. And I'm not here to indicate that they're not trying to do a good job, but it gets them rattled sometimes to take an online exam. They're used to sitting, as many of us are. I took all of my exams in a, excuse me, please, in a test center. But I would just tell you, please be sure you review with PMI.org those online procedures. And if there's any misconduct, or if you're late coming back from that break, they're very clear that they will not allow that in any regard. So I hope that helped, but it is a very strict way of looking at a proctor exam on an online presence, because when you take it in a test center, they're there with you more clearly, and you're in a closed room, and they can monitor you that way for presence and for attitude of politeness and ethics of way to take that exam. So online is a whole different ball game, but they're trying their best to give you the value that can be done from your online, but it is a very clear indication of you have to know how to navigate in an online software program.
Great, thank
So,
you so much.
mhm.
Our questions are rolling in currently. Let me see, how about, is it best to take the exam right after a boot camp, or is there an average study hours before taking the exam? Thanks, Erin.
What another good one, because I have a very strong opinion on this. When you take your 35 hours, it's a fire hose of data that you will step back and go, whoa, what was that train that just went through? So I make my recommendations that take it the soonest at 2 weeks after your PMP boot camp, but no longer than 4 weeks after that exam. And why do I say that? The best reviews are done by stepping back from your PMP boot camp and saying, I have to dissect that in my own way of studying now. And it takes about a week and a half to 2 weeks to go through your own study material. Then the next 2 weeks would be clearly spent. Any vendor will recommend this, that you go 2 weeks more, if possible, to get away. And I mean this the most polite way to say to you all, from your family, kiss them goodbye, and not have interruptions, and begin taking the free questions that can be open source to you. You can research those, or you could even take some our material that we offer from Beyond 20 actually has resources that are free for a 200 test question that's free sample test. There are other open source sample tests that you could take. So my point then, to make this a clear indication of what I'm answering you, is that I like to say 2 weeks to digest what you learned in your boot camp at your own study effort, and then 2 weeks to begin to reinforcing my error to you in my word, reinforcing how you would look at it in sample test and sample questions. Isn't the old story, it's how they ask the question, and that's why I like that 2 weeks of the 4 week span to come into play. Can you take it longer? I'll tell you what, my friends, I hope to be someday, if I see you in my classes, would be, you snooze, you lose. I use that all the time. You get away from this material, and before you know it, you have a lesson chance to pass that exam. 2 to 4 weeks. There's my answer in a long-term discussion with you. 2 to 4 weeks.
Great. I think you basically answered this in what you were just saying, but we did have a question specifically around what materials and books are recommended after training. Is there anything you haven't mentioned yet that you would recommend?
Yes, without going into naming those types of things right now, I'll just give you the simple view. If you go into any Google engine, go to a search engine and just put in 2021 free or open source, whichever word you like to say, free open source exams, and many things will pop up. Look only for those types of vendors that are offering something that is free, but not just 20 questions. Look for anything that is open sourced and free, from 50 questions all the way up to, some vendors offer open sourced free 180 or 200 question exams. There are some books in the market, but I would strongly, I know I keep pointing you back to Beyond 20 because I'm proud of us working in Beyond 20 this way, and I'm going to answer this out loud. They use the Crosswinds material, and it is a very recognized vendor, because what Crosswinds material allows you to do is go out after class, buy an activation code that allows you to see all of his material. The gentleman that owns that business and wrote our material for us is pointing you to an online presence of many study aids, many flashcards, many place mind maps, if you know what that means, and many place cards that help you study after you walk away. So it just depends on the vendor you take and what material they use. But I would say just do an open source type of call out to a Google search, and just 2021 PM exam free examples or free exams, and you'll see many of the reputable firms that are offering some of that free material. I'd rather not go into the specifics of the names right now. But ours is good. Ours is good. Cross
Ours is great. Okay, awesome. Thank you. We still have quite a few to get through, but we've got almost 20 minutes. I think we can do it. Let's see, from Amy, there was a previous requirement to prove several thousand hours of PM work. Is that still the case?
Yes, the exam requirements is the same. To wrap it up in a concise way, if you are your highest level of formal education is high school or GED or any international equivalency, they've really said it farther in this succinct way. You need 60 months experience. So they don't go the hours way anymore. It's called 60 months of experience that you'll have to document if you're high school, GED, or international equivalent. If your highest level of education instead is college, meaning 4-year, it doesn't give extra points for masters or for any PhD. 4 years of college means that you need you taking let's see, 60 months, then you need 36 months. My mind just went blank. I so apologize to you all. 36 months. And that's how you would document it in the new 4 screens, either 36 months for college or 60 months for the education associated to high school. So in other words, it's the same, just to caution, they don't talk in hours anymore, they talk in months.
Great,
so
thank you.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 questions here about the subject matter that's covered on the exam. I'm going to cluster those all together. So the first area, are there any questions on project scheduling, as in the precedence diagram method, forward passes, backward passes, etc.?
Yes. I know someone has familiarity with the older exam or what they do ask in project scheduling. That will still be there, but there is an update that I can offer in project scheduling. PMP has always been, PMI has always been specific about their project scheduling. To go back again to the DoD, Department of Defense way of doing what was called drawing a project schedule network diagram, and that you would understand what the term that you'll still see on your exam was called critical path analysis, and that was done by doing what was called a forward and backward pass. The update that I can provide you all is that you will no longer be required to do the forward and backward pass. Instead, you'll see the full diagrams now and understand the questions that will be put against a full diagram, instead of having you really in the day, which this person may be referring to, which was how I took my exam, was to draw the diagram and then do a forward backward pass to answer my questions. Those days are gone. You will be given the full diagram, but you still would have to understand what are the questions against that diagram for what is called the total float or the critical path. Those types of questions are still there, but not the front and back diagramming method.
Great. So same genre of questions. How about earned value management? Any formulas that need to be known for this?
Another great question, because these are some of the more specific areas of the exam that are always questionable for understanding. They still have 8 formulas that have always been there for your exam in earned value analysis, 4 dealing with your schedule and your cost variances, and 4 formulas that deal with the forecasting effort of a project. So all prior earned value formulas are still on the exam. And then I would counsel and to the same regard that there are 4 other formulas you need to know. In the estimating world, the old exam still has the new exam have this information on. You might want to remember your what is called the 3-point formula. There was also a teaching that is from the old to the new has stayed, what was called your communication channels formula is still there. And then there are 2 formulas that deal with standard deviation and other things like that. So bottom line, earned value management is still there with the same formulas, and you have 4 others that deal with other estimating and or standard deviation returns of value. So there's 12 formulas on the current exam as were prior.
Great. Okay, last one along these lines. How about the old PMBOK framework with knowledge areas and process groups? Is any of that still on the exam?
Yes. To put it in perspective, there are 15 areas tested on the new exam, and I can explain it to that question this way. The first chapter that you will learn in your exam deals with the business environment. The first chapter, there's a dedicated chapter to the business environment. Then there will be, asked in that question, when you had the old exam, one of your knowledge areas was resource management. One of your areas was stakeholder management. One of your old knowledge areas was communication. So those three areas now are grouped in to three chapters, but they look identical to the old exam. So what they did is they brought three: resource, stakeholder, communication, and positioned a new one about roles to be the other 42% that I mentioned. So roles, resources, stakeholder, communication will come forward as the other 42% of your exam in the in chapter view. Then they've dedicated a complete chapter to Agile Adaptive, a complete one chapter, brand new, never seen before on the prior exam. The remaining exam will dedicate its chapters in any vendor that you take to what is called the remaining: integration, scope, schedule, cost, procurement, quality, risk. That's 7, because the prior 3, resources, stakeholder, and communication, have been moved up into a roles delineation for the other portions of your exam. So simply stated, the old is there, my loves. It's knowledge areas 10 by 5 process groups is still in that exam. And that's the challenge that I've always said, and I'll be honest with you, that it's now the old exam plus three new areas: Agile, business environment, and roles. Otherwise, the old exam is sitting right there in front of you. The 6th edition, I should say, not the old exam. I should be more proper to you and say 6th edition. Yep, 10 knowledge areas, 5 process groups are still there. They're just distributed differently.
Great, thank you. Okay, so our last question is, it's a combo from Samantha. So she's asking about PDUs. Will any SAFE courses, certs, count toward PDUs? And then she expands that to ICP, Agile, Scrum Alliance, or Lean Six Sigma. Are you familiar with the PDU situation there?
Yes. The PDU, standing for the personal development units, are something that a PMP or any certification from the Project Management Institute need to be 60 hours or 60 PDUs. A PDU is 1 hour. So we could say that you need 60 personal development units over a 3-year cycle to sustain or maintain your project management PMP certification. If you have the PMP, I would say look into the Scrum Alliance. Look into the Scrum Alliance to get some PDUs, which will apply now to your PMP, because the Scrum Alliance is the best practice organization for Agile, where PMI is the best practice for the PMP. But now they are an alliance together to cross-mingle their PDUs. So if you go out to Scrum Alliance, you'll see some things that can be taken in webinars or articles or blogs that will benefit your PMP PDUs, and your PMP will now benefit anything that you do on the Agile side. I would recommend that you also, I'll be honest with you, if someone is thinking PDUs for their PMP, do some looking at some of the vendors that offer business analysis. Oh my gosh, I wish everybody would be better in business analysis to be a good at PMP. So now there's many firms that will offer free PDUs for business analysis to relate to your PMP, as will many vendors now begin realizing the importance of risk management in our world today, and offer those as well in webinars or free hours given for understanding risk management more importantly. The other thing that I would like to say to you, if you want to be a better PMP and you want to be a better project manager and look for free things, would be on learning better for your career, also would be understand that this new exam is clearly really pointing you to that stakeholders communication is the key with understanding why you're doing your work. That is the new exam in a heartbeat. That if you become clear that you're not there to do a product, a service, or a result, you're there to serve a customer, a client, a corridor that maybe is a service or a result instead of a hard product or supplying maintenance or operations work. It is really dedicated to understand that you need to lead by inspiration, secure trust from your stakeholders, communicate wisely, and then you'll have a better success in bringing forth all of what we've talked about: scope, schedule, cost, procurement, resources, risk, and agile to be a hybrid that is offered now in our industries. So that's what I would offer, that if you want to learn more, we have the web presence now, and there's so many free things out there. And check into risk management, business analysis, and learn from the Scrum Alliance some of the things that are going to now start to pop up more so in the adaptive or agile manifesto presence in globalization of project management. I have a passion to teach this. I hope you can pick that up from me, and I really do hope. I'll turn it back over to Lindsay, but I could talk all day, so I need to shush pretty darn soon.
The passion is evidence, and we are so grateful for it. I said that last one was the last question, and then another one came in. Do you have another one in you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. This one is around PDUs as well. Presuming that PDUs can only be accumulated after PMP certification, when can PDUs be accumulated? Immediately after certification?
Yes, the day that you pass your exam, they will send you a certificate that as of that date, you were awarded a project management professional, and only then can you start your PDUs. But as soon as you pass, and you could walk out the door and go look at a blog and get that as a 1 hour PDU. So yes, indeed. This will count. This hour will count.
Beat me to it. Yeah, this hour counts. We have, if you go to our YouTube channel, it's youtube.com/beyond20llc. We've got a ton of webinars on all manner of subjects. Any of them that is an hour will get you a PDU. So head on out there for that. With that, I think we can call it a webinar. Mac, thank you so much for doing this today. I know you're in the thick of it in Texas. We're so grateful that you were able to do this. We've got a PMP class coming up April 19th through the 22nd, and another one in late July. So if you're interested in getting signed up, head on over to beyond20.com and reach out if you've got any questions. Hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.